So this is basically what we want. Now I'm going to put this on the screen. Now the reason I've got this on a screen is so that I can heat it from underneath to dry out the flux. If you dry it out slowly, the solder won't jump around. I'm usually not patient enough. So I'm about 100 to 150 mil away. You can see that the solder is starting to jump a little bit in the flux. Don't worry. If it comes completely away from the bezel, you can just keep it warm, push it back with your solder pick. Yeah. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to heat this until the flux goes clear. Once the flux goes clear, I'll shift my flame up on top, and that's just to keep it so the solder doesn't jump up on the side of the bezel. So you never heat the top of your bezel directly. You always keep your flame underneath, around, on the inside, anywhere but right on the bezel wire. So you can see now that the flux has gone clear. At this point, when I shift my flame up, the solder should flow almost immediately. So I'm just on the inside. Yep. And you have a look, make sure that the solder flows all the way around. If you have a slight gap, as you're heating it, you can push down with the edge of your solder pick. This actually looks quite good. So quench this, pickle it. This green color is from the flux leaching out the copper from the sterling silver. So this is absolutely normal. Don't worry about this green color. It'll come off in the pickle. So here's our piece out of the pickle. You want to look closely at the base. You want to see the meniscus, which is the smooth curve in the solder between the two pieces. Look all the way around quite closely. You'll notice our solder joint on the side. Leave it alone. That's the last thing we clean up. So now saw to within 1/2 mil of your bezel. Don't touch the bezel with your saw blade. So about that close. Now, a trick, I guess a tip. If you have a nice sharp set of shears, you can trim your bezel with them, your base actually. Just a little bit at a time. Don't get any closer than that. So you always want to leave a little ledge that you file back. Now, if you're clumsy with these, you'll bend your bezel over and it'll be a drama. But you can see it's quite easy. To use the shears. Just be careful. Once you've trimmed the base fairly close, use your number 2 cut flat hand file. Hold this in your fingers. If you try to brace it against your bench peg, more often than not you'll bend over the bezel. Don't do that. Just follow the curve and adjust file until I touch the bezel, yeah, or leave it slightly proud. But this is close enough because we're going to go over it with 400 grade paper next, and that's when we'll tidy up this joint. Once you've filed the edge of the base back, being very careful not to file the top part of your bezel. Sand, 400 grade paper on your sanding stick. And what you want when you're finished is this. No visible difference between the base and the side. No thinning of the top. Now, do not put your stone in at this time. Putting the stone in is the very last thing we do. If this is as good a fit as it should be, you can't get the stone out. You can drill a hole in the back to push the stone out. We are going to pierce the design on this one, so it'll be quite easy to push the stone out at that time. So once you have your design, then fit your stone, make sure it's nice, take it out, and continue. Now this is going to be a ring, and our ring shank is going to go from this side to this side almost in a U, so that we'll be able to see our design on the back. Now, draw your design on the inside, drill a hole, thread your saw blade through, cut it out from the inside, because that way you can see how much you need to leave for the bezel. So we don't want to cut into the bezel. If the top edge of your bezel is a little bit off, at this time, once again, put it on the bench on sandpaper, sand it this way. Now we're really close to being finished. Pierce your design into the back of the metal. So here's our bezel setting ready to use for something else. So you could solder a jump ring on and make it into a pendant. The rest of the story is you can buy what they call die-stamped bezel settings. The bad thing is they're usually in sterling silver. Sterling is very difficult to push over. It's quite thin. It's usually a little bit shorter than you need, and the base is quite thin. If you're making handmade jewelry, hand make the jewelry. This isn't handmade, this is machine made. Yeah. And it's all stamped out in one go. It has its place. It saves you a lot of time, but it's not handmade. When you're making your own bezel settings, you can, before you cut the base out, you could melt balls, solder them onto the outside, and when you trim it, you just trim around the outside of your little melted balls. This is another version. It's a bezel setting with decoration. Now, when you go to solder your ring on, make sure that the join is up here. If you put the join down here, it will pull the solder out of the join, and it'll be an ugly setting. Yeah, this is quite a good way to do rings. So there you go. Make your own bezel settings, preferably. So this is a commercial setting. You can see it's quite thin, and the ring was soldered with the join on there, and you can see how it's opened up. Not pretty. Put the join up here. And this is a handmade setting. Nicer to me.